Aha, there we go.
Hello, how are you?
Hey, Rabbi, how are you? And tell me about your holidays. I know you are kind of in the middle of your holy season, and I'm coming up in December with ours with the Advent. So what's going on with you?
Well, we've made it past Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Those are the two big ones. We still have, yes, 10 days of a lot. And we are, although I have to say, in my sermon on Yom Kippur, I mentioned our real talk and our conversations and, in terms of really talking about how we need to really be conscious about changing the tenor and the just the relationships and how we speak with each other and talk with people in our country today. And so some of it is, as you and I always talk about, expanding your circles of influence and who are the people you talk to. And, do you live in an echo chamber or do you live in multiple spaces where you're learning from other people and challenging yourself?
I love it. So was your audience listening intently? You think they bought it? They like it or what?
I think some people liked it. I think it definitely caused, people to stop and think and ask themselves some questions. And, I think definitely given the time that we're living in, which is going to intensify, I think, over the next, 4.5 weeks till we get through an election and so on. So we'll see. And now we have 2 more holidays. Sukkot, which is a harvest holiday. We build sukkahs, huts. And so that starts on Friday night. And then Simchat Torah, which is our holiday in which we celebrate the Torah. We come to the end of the year reading cycle and we start all over again. And so we celebrate that. So those are, they take on it. I don't want to say they're not as serious because they absolutely are, but they just have a different feel to them. So
wonderful.
Yeah. So I'm excited for those.
You got a lot going on. So thank you for bringing yourself back to the microphone and
absolutely
program we're on How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi. And we're on chapter 6 on the body racist. We're talking about the shape and the thickness, the darkness of the skin, the body, how it changes, how it looks different when you compare Black and white bodies particularly. And I know you've got some comments about that, huh?
Well, I was also thinking about that in terms of also chapter 7 in culture and how much I see so much of those going together.
Yes.
And I think it's interesting, and this idea that he talks about, especially of body throughout this chapter, where especially the Black male body, and regardless of, I almost feel like what he talks about in the book is it's regardless of what the actual body size and shape is, it is this notion of what he really talks about is this racist idea that you see a Black male body and automatically your mind triggers, or there's an assumption of this is a violent person or this is potentially a dangerous person. And I think that that's really what has come to surface and really is this conversation that we all need to be having right now in our country of what that's about.
Yeah, he defined body racist as one who perceives certain racialized bodies as being more animal-like and more violent than others. And then if you're anti-racist, you are humanizing and deracializing and nonviolent behaviors not attached to any particular shape or form or color. So you're right, because the face of violence in America has always been presented as a Black face, and many times on the news, radio, stories, any kind of media. It's amazing that we always make a joke in my area of the Black community. It's like, oh, I bet you that wasn't a white person. If it was, they won't put their face on the news. But if it's a Black person, you'll see a mugshot right away. So it is kind of sad that that continues, and the history goes far back into the 1600s, where I think he notes that a lot of English colonizers felt that the Black body was devilish and dark and evil. And as we were talking earlier, it's a lack of understanding and knowing somebody that gets you to the point you decide to just put all these adjectives on them and walk away without doing the work. And we have to do some work if we're going to be anti-racist. We have to look at what has happened in the past and say, I got to forgive those folks. I don't know them, but they were wrong, you know, and they made a quick assumption, or they wanted to continue to use that free labor to the point that they kept everybody intimidated. So no one would go toward these individuals, these Black men and Black women, to support them and show any kind of love and care. It was all very intentionally structured to keep people enslaved. And it's really a time to change that. And it's changing the mindset. It's very, very difficult, but it's happening now. Yeah.
I think so. And part of it is, how do we also get out those images or old images, the terrible images that racialize, those racialized pictures and so on, that often get put forward.
Yeah. I don't have an answer. I know that probably Black Lives Matter is a huge part of the only answer I could focus on right now. Is no longer the civil rights movement by title. It's Black Lives Matters. It's zeroing in on, here's what the real issue is. Here's what you see when you see a Black person. Here's what you think you have to do to a George Floyd, who is a very tall, African, handsome American guy, very Black skinned. And you show the world that you can kill him right on screen, that you're a big person for taking somebody down like that, and showing the world that this is what you do to this kind of this person that looks like this. And I think Black Lives Matters is helping that. And I think a lot of people are finally hearing the real meaning of that phrase, where before I think it was very intimidating and the education was not out there. But a larger body, a thicker body is not threatening. It's the way a person is made. And if you look around, there are a lot of white men that are thick. I mean, there are a lot of beer drinkers in my family. I mean, they're taller, they're heavier. I mean, so I get this intentional presentation of certain people looking a certain way, reinforced even on TV and in movies. And I know we talked about, you know, women and beauty, and thin women are supposed to be beautiful, but not in my community.
Right. I want to go back to something that you just said, which I really think is what this moment needs right now, in terms of, you know, when you're talking about Black Lives Matter, and really the movement is about, we all need to stop and recognize that Black lives and Black life matter. And one of the things that I think is important in this time, that at least what I'm hearing you say, is that what we need to all do is stop, and we need to ask ourselves individually the question, what are the assumptions that come to me, or what are the biases that I have when I see a Black body? And is it different if I see a Black male body? Is it different if I see a Black female body? It may also be, what are the biases that I have if I see a male body, period? Like, if it, you know, there are some women who are going to cross the street regardless of that, whatever color that male person is. If it's a male, there are some women who just live in inherent fear of male bodies, and I'm gonna, you know, they'll cross the street or whatever else. But I think it's a time for us to stop and think about, what are the biases, or what are the assumptions that we have, and where do those come from? And how do we stop, and how do we say, just because I see a, you know, Black male body, doesn't mean that I know anything more about that person than he knows about me. But what assumptions am I making about him? And vice versa could be, what assumptions is he making about me? But I think that's what this moment calls for. What are we constantly making assumptions about all of the people on the street, as opposed to just saying, you're a human being, I'm a human being. Let's start there and give each other the benefit of the doubt that we're human beings, and then go from there.
So that's implicit bias. It's like it's part of you that's operating,
right,
that you haven't confronted and that you haven't chosen to change. Because your mom might tell you, always hold your purse a little tighter when you're walking down the street in the city. Okay, that's because I was raised in a city, but I hold my purse tight even when I'm in the county. So, but what happens to me is that I have to think, well, now that doesn't work for me anymore. That's not just a city, that's everywhere. There might be somebody who's hard pressed for cash, or who will do anything to get a credit card. So I have to realize that the reason I'm holding onto my purse is not because they're Black or that they're white, because I sometimes get very uncomfortable when I see white youth walking in a group. That always gives me the worst feeling in the world. So what it works for me is that I really know what I want to do. I want to keep my personal belongings to me, as opposed to focusing on that person's going to be a bad person, or that person has a record, or they're probably going to be a criminal element here. So I have to protect myself from them. I protect myself from the situation. So you're right. When you rethink, Rabbi, what are we really saying in our subconscious and our behavior that automatically goes into operation because we've been trained to act a certain way and to see certain things in people? So it is time to check that. It is. It's very subtle, but we all have some stuff clicking inside of us.
Right. And I think we have to just stop and confront it and ask ourselves the questions about, where does that come from? And then how do we break it down, or how do we dissect it within ourselves and say, all right, if I've had this, how do I now stop myself the next time from doing that? Or, whatever it is that we do.
Mm-hmm. I think what actually flashed in my mind, and it might tie to this really well, is also people have an expectation to see other people not like them in a lesser posture. And that's another thing that I think happens a lot in our society, where everybody has the opportunity, supposedly, and many people do, and many people take the opportunity. So the playing field is level in many ways. And so if you see someone, you're automatically assessing something about that person. So if you cannot assess them as being a criminal, then you might be assessing them as somebody that's, wow, just as equal as I am. And that bothers a lot of people too. When Black Lives Matters happens, there are a lot of people who feel that you should never be my supervisor. You should never be my professor in school. Like, something has happened here that you've gotten in a position that I've never thought you could be in, and you should not be in that way, especially if subliminally you've been trained that certain people rule the world. And there are a lot of Caucasian people, especially, who will not sign up. I have friends that are professors, will not sign up for their classes because they'll say, well, I wonder what that's all about. They really like me as a person, but they don't want you to determine their grade or their future. Something about what you've been trained to think that says, no, you can't do that. And yet the world is changing. There's not a lot of that perhaps going on, but I think that ties into exactly what you're saying when it comes to, okay, this life matters. It's like every other life on the street. And
well, and I think what you're saying too is that sense, and we don't want to hear it, and look, we don't like the word, but it's white supremacy. And what you're saying is what I'm hearing. If I say, I can't take a class with a Black professor because I'm not going to let that Black professor or Hispanic professor or whatever, I can only get grades from white people.
Exactly.
The scary thing is there's very real people out there who believe that.
Yes, there is.
Right.
You know it too, because the truth of the matter is, all you have to do is look at the companies in Missouri or in any state all across the United States. And CEOs are not necessarily women. There are more women than there are people of color in CEO positions. But definitely, it's like, you can work the field, you can make millions of dollars, but you can even build the White House for me in your history. But damn it, you are not going to stand in front of me and run Coca-Cola. Like, really? Why not? You know? So
Right.
there is this thing subliminally that still happens, that we're really, I think, addressing, but not hard enough. Because once Black Lives Matter simmers down, it's still going to boil up again, because we still haven't done all the work that needs to be done in that. What are you thinking, and why? And why don't you change that thinking so you can operate more successfully and not be locked into your grandparents' thinking, or your next door neighbors thinking, or
Right.
your sororities thinking? I mean, there's all these groups that hold people to, hey, they're never supposed to be in front. You know, they're not the drum major. They play the flute and the drums and march in the band. We're the drum major now.
Right. And that goes back to, you know, checking those biases, asking yourselves that question, and then also saying, who's telling you this, and stepping outside of it and challenging it. If you say, I don't buy that, I don't believe that, and I've seen that because I know so-and-so, or I know about so-and-so, who doesn't fit what you're telling me at all.
Yeah, and isn't it amazing, some of the young people, when I see how diverse the groups are that are marching out in the street, there are a lot of people that want to be free from the old stuff, black and white. They're saying, we're done. You guys you've played this band number, you've done this fiddle thing, you've been dancing this stuff since the 60s, and you've moved a little bit. And then all of a sudden we're stuck with what you've left undone. And we don't want to be enslaved mentally or physically with this stuff. And a lot of Caucasians feel that way as well. It's like, I have friends. I don't care. I'm international. I fly everywhere. I work everywhere. I have friends everywhere. I don't want to live up to your expectation of racism. I'm not going to do it.
Right.
And I think it's a beautiful thing. It's very tough, because when you think of the money that was made in slavery, there are some people that never think it's supposed to go away.
And you just wonder, like, no, but so much of it, you wonder, how is it that we still sit in it? And how is it that, you know, where does that keep perpetuating itself? And, you know, and why do we focus on some of these things in one area, as opposed to, you know, and keeping people down? You know, what's with that? And you keep one group down, and it's not there's a lot, you know, we look in our country and there's lots of groups that are kept down, you know, and it's not just in the Black community, it's not just in the immigrant community, you know, or in immigrant communities. We can say even in the white Caucasian communities, there are people that we have kept down, that we haven't helped bring up out of whatever either. And
so is there a tendency to always have to have somebody to step on or look down at? Is that the structure of some people, that they can't see that they can look to the left and to the right and be just as comfortable? They have to look up and down. They're just people like that, you know. Like, there's always got to be somebody on the bottom. And it's not me. So,
right. I guess it's that there's always got to be somebody you can blame for something.
Blame something. Yeah. Blame on something. And it's also, well, my ego has always got to be satisfied. I don't care how low I go. I'm never as low as the person below me. So guess what? The floor doesn't look the same anymore. And that's part of what's happening with Black Lives Matter. No, I'm not the same person. Matter of fact, I can defund the police department because it's my taxes that pay it. Now that's really saying I can reorder who's on the bottom here. but I don't want to. Most people don't have to have somebody on the bottom, somebody to step on. You know, it's a matter of, we just need to change things so our circle, our diversity circle, our circle of influence, and the way we help each other needs to change. So right away, people think they're going to get dogged out because that's the way that individual thinks. But it's not about that as much as it is about, it needs to change so that we get different results, so that we can have different goals. We're back, we're doing a civil war thing all over again. We're fighting on the, you know.
Well, and part of it is, how do we sit down and have conversations and then talk about, how do we get to human dignity? How do we get to, you know, equality? How do we get to justice? And how do I help raise you up while you help raise me up? And we're all working toward the same end game here.
Yeah, I think this is, confronting is very key. And I think that's what we're doing now. We have to confront it. We have to define it. And then we have to show what it is when we change, what it's going to look like and how it works better the other way. And until we confront it, a lot of people who are just intimidated to have the conversation, they just don't want to see it. But you have to see it. We're all part of it. And that's why I like this book, because you're either a racist or you're anti-racist.
Right.
And I think that's what pushing the lever here is, that we have to open our eyes and go, we don't want to live like that anymore. Let's change. And that is key. I think that is very key.
But then that change has to start individually. We each have to look at ourselves and say, what needs to change in me? And what do I need to do to take this a step forward? And when I make that change, then hopefully it'll be like a domino effect that, you know, people in my family will see that I made that change, and so they'll follow along, or my neighbors will see that, and whatever else, as we confront ourselves. I think so often we're ready to confront other people and say, you are the one who's doing this, as opposed to looking at ourselves and saying, what am I doing in this to cause problems? Or where am I, as he says, where am I not doing the anti-racist work that needs to be done?
Perfect. Yeah. Perfectly stated. Yeah. Because it was Don Lemon that said, silence is not an option. So you have to participate somewhere, and you have to then understand that your participation is creating a change and buy into the change. And so many people are for leadership because they rather follow than lead, and that's okay, as long as you realize you can't be quiet. Being quiet means the assumption is that you rather be a racist than an anti-racist. I hate to go there, because I know in our religious denominations, you're either for me or you're against me. You can't be on the fence. There's no fence.
Right. But I also think people need to recognize that when you're talking about being a leader, that doesn't mean you have to be the one that's in the street with the sign that's like yelling and screaming and marching. Being a leader doesn't mean that you're necessarily the loudest one, but being a leader means that in whatever community you are a part of, in whatever way is honors who you are, that you are leading by doing the work, as opposed to being dragged along with that, you know, I'll throw my hands in the air, I guess that's what it is. But it's, you know, are you, in whatever piece of the world that you are a part of or own or whatnot, are you doing that work? Are you looking at yourself, figuring out what you need to do, and moving and doing it? And I think if we all realize that it starts with us individually, that's what's going to be the force. You know, we can keep trying to do all these, you know, but it has to be on a person by person by person basis that then will compel the actual change to happen. You know, I think so much of it is just when we look at this time, you know, we look at George Floyd and what happened with that. No one can deny at all what happened. We all sat and saw that video. And so regardless of what anybody thinks, you can't deny that in
Yeah.
what we saw.
And
You
we
know,
cannot allow it to be the norm either, because if you
correct.
don't respond, it's like the yellow tapes. Every time you turn on the news, you get used to yellow tapes and you don't realize that's a life that represents death. Something has
Right.
happened. That's
Right.
tragic. And the same thing with Breonna Taylor. If you don't respond, that means someone could just decide, I want to go in a house, and you may rightfully feel that you're going into a house to do some real business in law enforcement. However, if you made a mistake and went into the wrong house, or someone started shooting because they were so devastated that you're coming in their house, you absolutely cannot not pay a price for making that mistake. And I'll tell you this, and I really feel terrible, $12 million sounds wonderful, but that's not what we're after.
Right. $12 million doesn't
Doesn't cut
begin
it.
to pay
Doesn't
for a
cut it.
life, but at the same, right. Even
Yeah.
for those that argue they had a warrant, they did this, they did that. We also have to think about the system that set all of that in place. So if
Yes.
you have a system that allows for stand and defend yourself, or whatever that's called, that you're allowed to, right, stand your ground, but you also have a system or a law that says law enforcement can go in without announcing themselves.
No knock. Yeah, no
Why,
knock. Uh-huh.
why would you assume that just because you walk in, somebody's not gonna stand their ground? So to have both of these, why are we not thinking about the contradiction of these laws?
You have a right. Yes, you have a
right,
right to think, when I lock my door, set my alarm, and ready to go to bed, that no one's going to come in here and attack me. And if so, I'm not thinking it's a police officer, number one. I'm actually thinking it's somebody else. So I have a right to defend myself. So why would you not think that that would happen? So you're obviously thinking, hey, it doesn't matter, because here's this body thing. You're all criminals, dark and evil, and whatever you're thinking in your mind that's going on. I have a right to do what I want to do. And that's a white privilege mentality that says, not in my house, you don't. I don't care if it's a little brown box on the sidewalk. This is my space, respect it. You can still do your work without killing me or anybody that looks like me. And that's where it's going. I feel sorry for people who think, well, I'm going to get off because they're going to just pay the insurance. Well, there needs to be more. There needs to be more. And we have got
we have to be asking ourselves those questions in terms of the system of laws that we have that then set everybody up for failure. In this sense, there can be, as you said, there's no winners in this.
Well, there is a winner. Breonna Taylor is the winner. That's my opinion, because the day that we can take a person through litigation and the judicial system does what it's supposed to do, even for someone who makes a mistake, we must say, you're guilty of making a mistake, a horrible mistake. You may not be worth $12 million to pay to that family, but you're not going to get off like you didn't do anything wrong. That's wrong. Black lives matter. You have got to pay your price, even if it's in writing or you do short time, which I don't like those things either. But to act like you don't have to worry about it. Don't worry, we'll take care of you. You'll get off. That is got to go. That's got to go.
Right. You took a life. You took a life, and
you made a horrible mistake. And maybe law enforcement is not where you need to be anymore. Yeah, there's a time to change occupations and careers. Time to move on. I don't want to see you in the street think you're going to make a mistake again and get away with it again. That's why the marches keep going. So for those that don't understand, why doesn't it stop? There's so many people, it's like, they don't get it. Well, they gave somebody else $20 million in Detroit. That's not what it's about. The insurance company pays. That means we pay. We pay for those services, for fire and law and social service. We pay, we're taxed for that. And so when they go out and get insurance, we're paying that insurance. And when they turn around and pay it off because somebody makes a mistake, we're paying all the way around. It makes no sense to buy into that. It's wrong. If nothing else, I would say, hey, I don't even want you to be a security guard. Go do something else. and don't handle another firearm, not legally. No, bad judgment. So let's talk about beauty. I know we don't have
Okay.
much. That's your thing. Go ahead, start it.
Oh, no. I said to you earlier, on
Yeah.
the one hand, when we talk about the assumptions about Black male bodies and, how they're automatically stereotyped or whatever, you and I began to have the conversation just in general about beauty and what I do think are, I guess we would say, cultural differences sometimes between all the different communities, be they ethnic communities, racial communities, whatever, in our country. And one of the things that that I have appreciated, at least I'll say as an outsider, in looking into the Black community, is that I feel like, at least for women, their size doesn't, this is, as you said before, Black women think differently, but I look at somebody like Lizzo, who is a musician, a larger Black woman. And when I don't know, there were some music awards that she dressed up and wore the most amazing suit. And it doesn't matter, that she isn't a size 2. She owned what she was wearing and just looked amazing. And everybody thought she looks amazing,
Yeah.
And yet, what does our society say when here's a woman who might be in a size 16 or 18, satin pantsuit, but she's not a size 0 or a size 2. And yet she walked that red carpet and she owned it and looked amazing. And I feel like there's some different, I don't know, I feel like I don't know even how to articulate myself today, but there are different beauty standards. And
yeah, I think, the thin or the twiggy or whatever we want to call it now, Charlie's Angels, that's going way back. I mean, all of those beautiful women who have been labeled, I think all women are beautiful, by the way, but society label as beautiful has given many women the opportunity to say, okay, I'm going to duplicate that look. But in the African-American community, we like the beauty of the thickness more so than we do the thin, in my opinion. And that's also been sort of a battleground for people who think, well, if you're going to apply for this job, let's go in the fashion world. For a long time, you had to look that part of the white model as opposed to the African-American female on the runway. And so when we start having our own fashion shows and doing our own fashion numbers, and we put the full figure woman on stage and she was packing it and rocking it, the audience goes wild. Why? Because she's the person that I am. And so I'm happy with myself. And I could appreciate the thin person, but don't keep telling me that's the only beauty that there is. And that continues to be a subtlety, even in our commercials. I see every now and then somebody will have a commercial with more of a full figure person, but 99% of the time it's still pushing this look that you have to have if you're going to be beautiful as an American standard. That standard's changed. It's nice to have everybody's beauty on stage. And I push it from the hair. We like braids, we like afro, we like straight hair, we like whatever we feel. We want to dress the part that is according to how we feel, and not how we feel like we have to do it because society accepts or rejects. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's one of those things that, when you think about, I've been to Black churches before on a Sunday morning, and it is the most colorful place in terms of just clothing, and not just women, men, that there isn't this, your suit doesn't have to be navy, black, or gray. It can be, all different colors.
Well, the crown, and there used to be a great stage production called Crowns, that the hat is part of the post-slavery. I have to, on Sunday morning, I have to have a special day that I look absolutely superb because I always worked in a uniform of some kind. And I always had to go with the dictates of the job description. So it's like a person that's gone to parochial school. Whenever you see them at a party, they're like, wow, I can't believe that's you, because they've gotten out of the uniform, you know? So when you want to give your very best, especially in a church setting, in African-American churches, you give your best to God, you give it all. And so it's been a wonderful history that I love. And you're right, it's a little bit on the fashion show side, but it's also on the praise and glory side.
I was going to say, what are you doing it for? Which is one of the things I love, because that's what we talk about traditionally in the Jewish community, that on Shabbat, on the Sabbath, you're supposed to dress up. For the holidays and the festivals, you're supposed to be wearing your best, as you, not that, you know, at Yom Kippur, we're not supposed to be focused on makeup and fashion or anything like that as a day of atonement, but in other places, you are putting on new clothing and wearing your best. That's when you are setting your table to be the best, you know? So even, I love how you talk about the rest of the week, you're, you know, people were in whatever their work clothes were, but Sunday, as that day of God, you got to put on your best. And those are those things that we even talk about. What is the time when your table is the best, in terms of even the food that you're eating? If you can't afford it, you know, other days of the week, it's on Shabbat, on the Sabbath, when you make sure, you know, if I don't have enough money to be eating meat the rest of the time during the week, you eat your chicken or your fish or whatever for those meals, because this is a time where we are celebrating God and resting and doing differently.
Yes, it's so cool, because the body is something else. And I like it now because you can't tell sometimes who or where a person comes from. You don't know their roots anymore, because you just see people enjoying their lives and doing what they feel is important for them to do. And I like that, where before it was always so black and white. I mean, it was cut and dry. And I think we've moved away from that quite a bit. And yet we still need to do a little bit more, because the younger people, they'll come if they can wear their jeans, or they can wear something very casual. And so they don't want to hold to the big flowery hats and the wonderful suits and the shoes that are just off the chain. They don't live that life. They're minimalists. They don't want all those things in their closet. So you have culture changes going on. And sometimes I had to think at the church where I pastored last, are you serious? You have on a sweatsuit? And I think, well, yeah, but they're here and they're happy. They got a cup of coffee, their tennis shoes. They're going to go do whatever they want to do after service. It's a new day. And so we have to be open and break away from those old things that locked us down for years.
Right. And I think those are cultural changes that are sort of these new, as you know, not necessarily, it's more of like generational cultural changes, you know, where we experience it too. And, or when I have somebody say to me, you know, Rabbi, those kids up on, you know, who got up on the pulpit and their shirts were a little too short, or, you know, they were wearing jeans and a button-down shirt.
Oh my God, no stockings. Whoop.
Right. But it's the same thing you say. We have to stop and say, but they're here. You know, what's more important, what they look like or that they're present? And so, you know, we are moving into this time that's much more casual, you know, in terms of, I never thought about it as minimalist, that people have been, you know, I love shoes. So I don't know, no matter how minimal I might be, you know, it's hard to, I like shoes.
Enjoy it. I think, you know, when this guy was talking about the body, I could see where, you know, you had to look a certain way and be a certain way, or else you got demonized and dehumanized. And so the key is now that, you know, we're working against those things that lock people into little boxes and labels. And that's what's important. And even the young people, they can come and be, you know, come as you are is who we're supposed to be and what we're supposed to articulate to people. And I think that's really important.
And I think that's in the culture chapter that he talks about too. I think it's about how do we look past also what someone looks like or how somebody is dressed. and recognize that sometimes people dress the way they dress for all sorts of reasons. Sometimes it's what they can afford. Sometimes it's what they love and they want to dress that way, even if they, can be dressed in, whatever fashion designer clothes somebody thinks they should be dressed in. And it's giving people the benefit of the doubt and not making assumptions, because I'm wearing jeans that are worn low around my hips, or I'm wearing a white tank top and chains, or whatever else, or I'm wearing a polo shirt that's, tucked in.
There are so many things that we have with Black Lives Matter that we're looking at that is very important, is how we view people and how we want to hold them into some kind of structure that is not ours to make. The structure is not ours to make. And we are not in charge of anybody else's life. We're in charge of having harmony among the different lives. And until we get away from, you're not supposed to have that. You're not supposed to be able to do that. You're not supposed to dress like that. These rules that we have learned and have adopted from a whole different generation or different groups of people, we have to rework those and get away from them, because they're not serving us anymore. I hate to talk about the statutes. They even taken the statutes down. They don't serve us anymore. They don't serve us. We don't want them anymore. And I think that's the beautiful part that we're going through. It's a little painful for some people. But I pray though that we get to the point that we can feel that we've cleaned up a lot of stuff that we've ignored and lived with. Yeah.
That's powerful. That's powerful. I think there's a lot of stuff that we often live with that we don't always, it's easier in our minds to just either turn away from it as opposed to confronting it head on. And I think you're right. That's the moment where we are, and the moment where everybody needs to stop and do something. And it doesn't, again, you don't have to be marching in the streets, but you have to understand why people are doing it, and then say, how can I be part of the solution? How can I, can I sit down and listen? Let me sit and listen to you and ask questions and understand. And then, when we come to an understanding and figure out a lot of times that we probably agree with each other, we just have to figure out how do we work together to get there.
And if the playing field gets leveled, it gets leveled. We have to be realistic about that. There are some people who just don't think anybody's supposed to be at the front of the line but them. And that's changing dramatically. A new leader can come around the corner leading a band, or it could be the same old leader from 2 years ago. It's all about what we really desire to have happen, not what has to happen. So, by the way, I don't play any instruments, so I would be a great drum major.
You just stand with that and marching. Yes. Twirling around. And
story on that. The drum major, yeah. Quite exotic. Got to be a good dancer and a good marcher. Knees got to come up real high, because you don't do anything else. You got to march.
Well, and and sometimes you set that pace for everybody else too.
You do. The crowd roars when they see the drum major, because they connect with usually the colors that they're wearing. So it's either your favorite band, or it's your high school or your college band. I mean, whatever it is. But the dramatics that go with leading that group in is very important. So just because you're tall doesn't make you a drum major. Just because you're a male doesn't make you a drum major. We can have a midget and it could be a female. It's a drum major.
Right.
Yeah, I love it. So I like the conversation about the body. It helped me to understand why people react as soon as they see sometimes a face that they think is going to steal or take or rob or burglarize. But we've got to really get rid of that. That's so old to me. That's been around so long. assume.
It is. And I think we need to say that just when we think about body too, beyond color. What are the assumptions that we make if and when we see tattoos on people? What are the assumptions that we make when we look at a body and there are different piercings? What are the assumptions we make? You talked about hair before, you know, when hair,
the beard
right,
on the chin.
facial hair, body hair, you know, we all make all sorts of assumptions, and why?
Yes, I agree. Even down to the plaid shirts. I freak out. I'm thinking we have gotten down to everything about a person now. It's not just the body. It's like, really?
Well, I mean, there are things that trigger assumptions, and it's really being able to stop and ask ourselves, what is it about that? What is it if I see someone wearing flip-flops that I assume about them because they're wearing flip-flops?
That's right. That's right. No assumptions, my friend. No assumptions. How about that?
What a world it would be if we could not make assumptions.
Yeah. My grandmother used to think that. I'm not thinking it. I'm not her. I'm somebody else. So stand up and be you and establish your own guidelines and thoughts and rules about life and people. Prayerfully, they'll be better.
And to challenge yourself, you know, when you see that person that, you know, if you're feeling okay, say hi. Just say, smile and say hello. Exactly. Challenge that assumption that is in there.
Release yourself, because a lot of us we're imprisoned within our own thinking and our own brains, our own beliefs that we have to honor somebody else's rules. It's like, release yourself, let it go.
Right. I constantly think back to one of our first conversations where we talked about the subway and public transportation and sort of that assumption of where the empty seats that are on and who are they often next to. Not that I have a lot of opportunities to ride, you know, public transportation in St. Louis, just in terms of subways, but, you know, that is always in my head, and thinking about that and making sure if there's an empty seat there and there's somebody there, you know, a person of color, in my head, I say, Brigitte, sit down there. Do not make assumptions. Just sit there. And I think back to the conversation that you said, that so often people's brains go to leaving that seat open.
Yes.
Because you don't know that person. So now in my mind is sit down, just sit down.
Good for you.
Say hello.
Good for you. Then they're going, what does she want?
Right. Half the time, no one needs or wants to talk to anybody next to them. So, right. But it's just, thank you. How do we learn from somebody and keep that in our mind? And so that if, you know, when you said that, I thought, I probably pass up and look for, you know, an empty seat elsewhere or whatever else. And now I think of just sit down, you know?
Yeah. Excellent.
And
that's a good note to end on. I like it. All right. That puts us at the end. I love it. Just sit down. There you go.
Just sit down. Yeah.
All right. So we catch up with each other next week.
We will do that.
Made it through. Okay, great.
Absolutely. And we hope other people will join us, and, you know, feel free to ask questions and, you know.
Sure. Get to us on www.mydiversitycircle.com. And we'd love to hear from you. Leave information for us or comments. And we'll see you next week. Next Wednesday, 5 o'clock.
It's been great to be with you.
Love you, Rabbi.
Love you too, Pastor Sheila. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.